You're listening to the Limitless Leaders podcast series, brought to you by ASPS, the Aesthetic Society, and the American Hernia Society, with the generous support of Allergan Aesthetics. I'm Dr. Ashley Amalfi. I'm a board-certified plastic surgeon at the Quatella Center for Plastic Surgery in Rochester, New York, and I'm the vice chair of the ASPS Women's Plastic Surgeons Forum, and also a member of the Limitless Leaders Steering Committee. I invite you to check out Season 1 of the Limitless Leaders podcast, where we share real-life stories of women in our field who are tackling gender-related issues, large and small. The topics we cover are as diverse as the women we will be speaking to. I hope you enjoy this listening experience. Hello, listeners. I'm today's special guest host of Limitless Leaders, Dr. Anuja Antony. I'm a plastic surgeon. I've been in practice for almost 15 years now, located in Chicago, and I'm really excited about today's topic. Not all families look alike. And we have some incredible women here today that are really cool, incredibly articulate, and funny. And not only successful and incredible businesswomen with plastic surgery practices that are exploding with amazing work, but they also have unique and interesting families. And we're going to hear about what drives them, hear about what their families look like, and what they're passionate about. So I'm going to start by calling on Deb White, and if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be great. She's located in Arizona, I believe.
Well, there's not too much to say because mine's pretty straightforward. I've been in practice since 1996, and so I'm solo practice, single, never married, and have a 17-year-old daughter that we're trying to get to launch at this time, and so that's always a little stressful. But so I've never done academics. I started out as an employee for about 6 months and then went off on my own and kind of never looked back. And, built my own office, built my own practice. So.
Well, wonderful to have you on the podcast. And Deb is incredibly funny, so I'm looking to hear more and more of her pearls of wisdom with a funny twist. I'm going to call on Melinda Haws in Nashville next. Can you tell us a little about yourself? Mindy is an up-and-coming ASAP's president, so we're really very lucky to have someone with her expertise and also just, kind of powerhouse in our society. So, Mindy, I'll give to you.
That's a great introduction. I will try to live up to it. I started practice in 1998 in academia. I was at the University of Nevada School of Medicine in Las Vegas. I was there for approximately 4 years, and then the timing was right, and I moved back to Nashville and joined my best friend, Dr. Mary Grass, in a plastic surgery practice. We have now, in January, will be 20 years we've been in practice, so quite a long practice history, really, compared to many plastic surgeons. I think we can all attest to that. I am also a single mother, raised my daughter totally on her own, no dad in the picture, no dad on the birth certificate. And as we talked earlier, she's a year older than Deb's daughter, Henley. We actually vacationed together. And she has just started college, so I'm actually an empty nester, which coincides well with being vice president of the Aesthetic Society. So hopefully she'll be all settled by the time I'm president. I'm timing it just right.
Yeah, you're a master at timing, so I have to say that's pretty good. I need to get some lessons on that script.
It's a lot more luck than planning, but we'll go.
I think there's the maybe a little bit of both. And then I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Hunsicker, who is another amazing, I'm going to rename this podcast the Plastic Surgery Empire Women or something like that, because all of these women are really a lot to learn from. She's located in Denver, Colorado. And, at some point I'm going to try to get her to talk about her race car driving, but you don't have to do that just yet. So go ahead, Lisa. Let's hear a little bit about your family. I know you've got a lot of interesting components that I'd love to hear about.
Yeah, we have a very interesting family. I've been in practice for 20 years now. I came out of fellowship and started my own solo private practice. And I have a very unique family in that we're gay. And so we have moms, and then we split and then remarried. So now we have 4 moms. So I have like hypermomia, I think. So
the kids got a lot of love probably going on. That's pretty nice.
Yeah, exactly. So, it was very interesting, doing training, where everyone was getting married, and obviously, I was very quiet and was not very open. So, it made sense for me not to go into academia and for me to go into private practice. And I set up my own practice and built it. And now, actually, this year, I can now say I'm no longer in solo private practice. We have a new partner that has joined me, and so now we're even growing the practice. So
amazing. Well, I think that when you're a plastic surgeon and you're managing, really a business, figuring out how to manage your family is really different for everybody. And I'd love for each of you to maybe share a little bit of your stories. What were some of the hurdles and what were some of the successes in kind of keeping your family as you define it together and your business kind of going as well? Mindy, maybe we'll start with you if you feel comfortable kind of sharing a little bit, shed a little light on that for yourself.
Always happy to share. I joined my partner, Mary Gingras, in January 2002. I gave birth to my daughter, Tessa, in October of 2002. And luckily, I had a very supportive business partner who made me take full 6 weeks of maternity leave. And then at that point, she had always had a nanny, but I went a different route, and my daughter was in daycare from 7 weeks post-birth until she went to kindergarten. And then when she went to school, she was enrolled in before care and in aftercare. And that was kind of her playground. Playing at night was playing with the kids until mommy got done operating and could come and pick her up. Early on in her life, my mom would come stay with us for 10 to 14 days a month. And then when my daughter was 11, one of my brothers actually moved in. He had gotten divorced, had full custody of his daughter. And so he moved in, and we were able to co-parent in a way that really benefited both of us. And we could take turns who picked up the kids from school, and without ever feeling guilty for the other one doing anything, because we were always paying it back in kind. Him moving in also kind of coincided with when I started to really step up in the society and do more leadership wise, because I had someone in the house all the time, whatever I needed to do.
A lot of it takes a certain personality to kind of keep that ecosystem running. I don't know if I could live with my brother. So, I have a lot of respect and admiration for that, because I think that, it takes a lot of flexibility and a lot of mutual understanding and trying to make sure everybody in the house is really benefiting. What was the key to your success there?
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting because he and I have lived together at like almost every decade. There was a time in our 20s when he lived with me, in my 30s, he's a little younger than me. And then again, when he was in his 40s. So, and we've always been at different stages in our life, but then something happens and we end up in the same town, and he lives with me for some period of time. And it worked great. He did all the grocery shopping. He did most of the cooking. I mean, really, I can't complain. It wasn't like he waited on what I wanted to do with my kid, because it was my kid and he took care of his kid. So it worked out really, really well. And now in the last 2 years, I'm engaged, and my partner, Zeus, has moved in, and he's active duty military. And so in the last year, and for a while it was him, my brother, my niece, my daughter, and it was really quite the commune we had going on, even during COVID.
Full house,
how many
right?
hands of cards we played. It was incredible. But in the last 6 months, my brother and my niece have moved out. They're only about a quarter of a mile away. And my daughter's now started college, so I'm in an empty nester phase.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a transition in itself. But it definitely,
gives you some insights into how you can make it work, even when you're kind of doing it yourself. And that's not an easy situation, but you kind of have to build that ecosystem. It takes a village, right? So amazing story, just even to start. So I'm going to turn it over to Lisa maybe now to kind of talk a little bit about her family. I know you did a lot of tag team parenting and things, and you're kind of co-parenting, and I think that's a unique situation you're in as well, which sounds like you've had to have a lot of good communication to really make that work. So maybe you can talk about that, and how you plan and how you kind of manage, when you have 4 moms,
Well, it's interesting because when I was first together with my ex, it was just the two of us. But then when we split, I was a single parent for, a while, and so it's so hard to be in the OR and kind of doing the. We did a nanny for the very first year, but then did daycare very much like Mindy did, and so we had 3 kids in 3 different schools. So we had one in high school and one in middle school and one in elementary school and or one in middle and daycare and in elementary school. So it was always different schools. And so you're always trying to tag team and get everybody there. And, nobody really cares that you're stuck in the OR and that your case started later, because of other issues. And so just trying to get there. So having a good relationship with the daycare was really important, for that to work. And then, now my wife is a trauma surgeon, and so she's on trauma call for 24 hours. So she's gone, so it's like, single parent, not single parent, single parent, not single parent. So it's always this constant changing pattern. And so really communication is really key. Like, I'm in the OR, you're in the OR, but when are you finishing and when do you start? And, okay, I'll get the morning and you pick up the afternoon. And it's just.
Yeah, I mean, sounds like you're both pretty much powerhouses. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty hectic when you have 2 surgeons in the family, and then I think when they're married, that adds a layer of negotiating, I think, to make everything work.
Right.
So I'm going to turn it to Deb, to talk a little bit about her family. I have smaller kids, younger kids, and Deb told me the scariest thing is still waiting for me. So I thought that was pretty funny. Teaching a teenager to drive apparently on the highway is something I have to look forward to. So Deb, I'm going to turn it over to you.
It's more frightening than any trauma or anything you've ever been to. It's just, man, it's turned me into a horrible backseat driver, and now I'm afraid to drive with anybody because I'm like noticing. And she's actually, she's cautious and everything, but she's too cautious. So Mindy's ears were probably burning yesterday because I was explaining to Anu that we had a similar situation, but she did it so much better. And so if I'm giving advice to someone, because I remember people coming up and saying, how did you do it as a single parent? And I think a better thing than solo practice would be having a good partner like Mindy does, because then if you have to be gone, there's someone that can see your patients and, that kind of thing. So I went back to work a week after my C-section, and because there really is no other choice. And like right now,
Incredible.
I'm on a scooter because I had a bunion surgery, and I went to work the day after my bunion surgery because, again, there's not much choice. And then, my family's great, but no one lives anywhere near me. My parents don't live near me. My siblings don't live near me. Otherwise, I'm sure they would have helped. They're awesome. So I was fortunate to get a really good nanny. The first nanny after 6 months got a teaching job. And so the next one I got, we had for the next 12 years. And, Eileen was just wonderful. She would come with me to meetings. She didn't live with me, but she lived close by. So if I got called in the middle of the night, she could come in. And,
how do you foster that relationship? I mean, having a nanny that you can call in the middle of the night for 12 years, that's pretty unique.
She was amazing. She just passed away this year, which was very hard
Oh, I'm sorry.
for all of us. But she was like, we called her Grammy, and she had kids in the area with grandkids that were Henley's age, and she just adopted us as part of the family, and she loved, helping out. And like I said, I don't know what we would have done without Eileen. And I'm sure it would have been, we would have managed somehow, but it wouldn't have been the same. And then,
Yeah. Sounds like she was
unlike,
part of your family. Yeah.
yeah, she really was part of the family. And then the other thing that I had that I wouldn't recommend is, ongoing custody issues, because, legal battles. So I'm not being very funny now, unfortunately. I'm sorry, but you
No,
guys
this is a serious
actually
topic. It's important. Yeah.
an assessment, and depositions and psychologists and psychiatric evaluations, and CPS and that kind of stuff is difficult. And I was initially on the leadership track, and like I've been president of my state society, I've been president of the regional society, but I realized pretty soon that I wasn't going to be able to can't do everything. And so I'm so proud of Mindy. And I started pretty old also for parenting. I was 40. And so maybe I can take that mantle back up later once I'm an empty nester. I'm probably going to pause and take a breath, see how it goes. But it is possible, but you have to be flexible. And my friends helped out a lot too, although
Yeah.
I shared with Anu how I called you sobbing after I had the newborn, saying how I thought you guys all lied to me.
You lied to me.
Nobody prepares you, right? Nobody tells you the
Oh,
truth.
it's going to be the
No,
best thing you ever did. And I'm like sobbing. I thought my life was fine. You guys just wanted to be as unhappy as you are.
so this is the bottom line. I was one of those women who was miserable, like from the minute the sperm.
Me too. Me too.
I was miserable. I had 2 weeks in the middle of my pregnancy. I wasn't nauseated. The rest of the time, I felt terrible. So by the time when I had my daughter, I felt great. No postpartum depression. I was so happy not being pregnant. Deb, on the other hand, is one of those women that gets the cute 9-month pregnancy photo shoot in like a bralette and hip huggers with her cute belly hanging out. So yeah, no kidding. You had a great pregnancy. Of course, you felt a little down afterwards. I felt unbelievably relieved to no longer be pregnant.
I miscalculated. I thought that, made it through general surgery and plastics. I can sleep every other night. How bad could it be having a kid? So I really, and anyone has a kid will laugh at this. I honestly thought that I could work during the day and take care of the child at night. And I was breastfeeding and pumping. And so I thought, maybe she'll wake me up every 3 hours for a little bit. No, I didn't have one of those kids. She didn't sleep through the night till I turned off the baby monitor. That's when she slept through the night. And so, I started getting crabbier and crabbier. And, people kept like trying to give me Zoloft. I'm like, I'm not depressed. I'm super tired. And finally, went to a psychologist who basically said, you just need to buy some more help and don't feel guilty about it. And like I told Anu last night, once I knew I was going to get to sleep even 3 nights a week, I could manage. But not sleeping for weeks on end was not working for me or my patients, I'm sure. So you figure,
on call every day.
Like 24 hours, right?
Yeah, 24 hours every day.
and they didn't have places to pump. I had to pump in the stupid bathroom stall or whatever,
Oh, I've done that. Oh, I had a kid, my first one, my second was a surprise. My first could cry for 16, 20 hours straight. I mean, nobody tells you about that kid, I mean, that's the kid no one talks about. Now he's an angel now, but man, I was so glad to be getting my MBA. I would leave my kid with my husband and I'd be like, I will see you after this weekend. And I'd be so happy to be like asleep in class at school and not like with my child who could scream in every 16 levels of fire engine red. I mean, it was always, and I'd be like, something's wrong. Oh no, he's just hungry. But it was I can relate. I can relate. The second luckily came without a lot of planning. That was an accident. I was 41. So, I wouldn't have done that again if I had a choice, but luckily it worked out. Um, so, you know, um, all of you have, and I think, Deb brought up an important issue, and it can be different for everybody, but, I think also if you're going through legal issues and, having to manage that, that can be incredibly draining. Has that happened to anybody else, on today? And is that something that, I know that Mindy was talking about, being a single mom and having issues with getting a passport. And, maybe you can talk to that a little, Mindy, because I think that, maybe it's a bit more accepted today, but still people are people, and they say a lot of things out of turn, and they definitely don't always respect, what's going on in your life. They're very invasive.
So when it was about 2008, my daughter was 6, and I took her to get a passport, and you have to have both parents sign off on the passport, and there's only one parent. And I brought the birth certificate that I'm the only one on the birth certificate. And the passport agent looked at me and said, everybody has a dad. Where's her dad's signature? And I said, she's standing right here, right? She doesn't have a dad. Not everybody has a dad. I've gone through this with parents at the daycare center. There's all different ways to have babies now. You don't have to necessarily have a dad. Yeah, there's a sperm involved somewhere, but there's not necessarily a dad. So it's a whole different level of challenge. But to my credit, because I didn't have anybody else on the birth certificate, I didn't have to go through custody battles like Deb did. And bless your heart, Deb, for all you went through. And I didn't. So the hardest part is being a single parent. But also the easiest part was I didn't have those battles with another parent that a lot of people do go through.
Yeah, I can only imagine what that feels like, having to deal with not only the financial burden, but the emotional burden, and kind of dealing with. I've certainly had a lot of friends who've gone through it for various reasons, and it is heartbreaking. It's tough. It's tough on the kids, and you try to be, I think, a good parent, especially when you may want them involved in your child's life, but figuring it out can be challenging. Lisa, maybe you can talk a little bit about that, or it sounds like that wasn't as much of an issue, or maybe it's like you're at the point where
Oh,
you kind
actually,
of
it
look
was
back.
just no, it was very much like Mindy because we don't come with a birth certificate that matches what most everybody has. I mean, there's no dad. Um, there's two moms. I mean, our birth certificate for our son has two moms on there, but to travel and get passports and stuff, we traveled basically right as he was born. So he had a passport early, but as a gay family, it's very, very difficult to travel because there should be a man always accompanying us and should always be representing our family, especially outside the U.S. And so it's like, okay, well, there there is no dad. And we had you have to get permission from the other parent in order to leave, and if you don't have permission and you don't have a letter that you can leave, it just creates a lot of problems. And we got stuck in Central America, and we almost couldn't enter. And so my wife got through, but my son couldn't get through, and I had to stay with him, but I had already cleared, but we couldn't clear him, and he was this little guy, and we're trying to they're like, we need some certification. And then when they finally saw the passport that matched the birth certificate, they're like, that's not a dad, we need the dad. Like, there is no dad. Can you see it says moms? And so they almost weren't going to let us in. And so finally we had to have a handwritten note that all the paperwork didn't matter, but another handwritten note and a driver's license picture that we're sitting in customs, and our whole family's like split apart, and he's sobbing because he thinks that he's being taken away. And we're like, everybody just calm down. We're trying to go on vacation. It's so yeah, it's always very difficult. And then then when you want to leave and you want to go somewhere and you have another parent to deal with, it's so difficult because you have to get their okay and you have to get their permission and they have to be okay. And so, I mean, we've had so many trips where, we're waiting on paperwork, and then we get the paperwork, but literally the day before, we get well, I'm not really comfortable with you traveling. So then it's like, what we're 24 hours to leave. What are we
Oh my
supposed to do?
gosh.
We cancel our trip, and they can revoke, and it's almost, sometimes it can be used as a power, engagement of like, it's like, I'm not telling you no, but I'm not really comfortable. Like, you are saying no, just say no. So call it what it is, but here, let's, tell your son that you're not going to let him go. And it's like, well, so you have to do this dance. You're like, oh, you know, and,
Yeah.
meanwhile, you're just like, it's funny that I envy Mindy in that, like, there's nobody on there, so you don't have to talk with anybody. You get to come and go as you please.
Yeah, that's
There's
crazy.
no talking to anybody about where are we going to go to school or what are we going to do. Nobody else to help pay for anything, but we all have good paying jobs, and having a way to pay for stuff is usually not the issue. Not having to ask permission or negotiate is a true gift for me.
Yeah, wow, that's challenging. I mean, when I had my kids, I'm Indian. My husband's, from Iowa, but Austrian German descent, and you never know what the children are really going to look like. And even once you see them, they still may or may not look like you. And so I made sure they had hyphenated names. I didn't want anybody thinking I was running off with someone else's child on the plane. It's all sorts of things you never think about till you actually have these children that you're kind of traveling with, and people are kind of questioning your family or how you look, and if you look different than other families, and who's who. And we're fortunate our children make it a little easier. They're like a perfect blend of each of us in so many ways. So it doesn't have as many questions, like who's that, and why are you with them. But I've certainly heard stories like that, and even friends, plastic surgery friends, who people think are the nanny of their own children, and they call me crying and saying, and I say, well, you're a hot nanny. That's fine. Like, if they think you're the nanny, like you're one good looking nanny. So that's a compliment, because they probably think you ran off with the husband or something. So, I think that it's challenging, and people never even think about the things that we have to go through. And the extra steps, and you're thinking about a vacation, but you have to plan 100 things for a vacation. And then it sounds like even then some, and then even at the last minute, the rug can be pulled out from under you. So that's challenging. Mindy, I'm sorry were you gonna say something? I didn't know if I cut you off or anything. I'm really moved in hearing everybody's story, and just really, it kind of gives you a lot of thought. And I think it's really helpful for families that do look different than maybe your typical prototypical American family, whether you're uniparenting, co-parenting, or what do I call your family, Lisa? That's like multi-parenting.
I haven't come up with a word for it that's not a bad word. No, it's co-parenting. Lots of co-parenting.
At least, tell me a little bit, and this is going to shift topics a bit, but I know you're passionate about race car driving, and I think that's pretty different. And one of the things I thought about, and I love that you pursue your passion, but do you ever have any fear about how that impacts your children or maybe your loved ones? Or, I mean, we all have side passions, and some of them, I mean, being a surgeon is a full-time job in itself, and certainly has its own, um, hazards of the job, which, go without saying. But how does that kind of factor in? And by the way, I think it's super cool. You're all boss ladies. I'm so excited to be just talking to all of you.
Well, racing is a wonderful, wonderful thing, and Deb has also enjoyed some of this as well. The great thing about racing is that you get in a car and you can be hyper focused, which is what we do in the OR, but there's really nobody talking to you. And it's all about you doing what you want to do in that moment. And you're not thinking about anything else except for it's a very experiential moment of you have to be in the moment, and you have to be thinking, always looking ahead to the next turn. You can't be looking behind. It's always just moving forward. But it's a wonderful feeling. And we do like a timeout before we go out, in a debrief after each race of like what went well, what didn't go well, and do we have all the things. And when you miss those, they are very, very dramatic. We had earlier this year, my wife usually travels with me, and she and I really tag team very, very well, and we have a routine. And she ended up being on call and couldn't go, and so the routine wasn't how we normally do it. And I went out to race, and the hood pins on the front of the car did not get checked. And so I went out to race, and at 120 miles an hour in a turn, the hood came up. And so it was inevitable that a bad thing was going to happen. But, fortunately, I didn't crash the car, but I managed to control the car through the turn and get pulled over. And nobody got hurt, which is good. And so we've had these conversations because these things can happen. And really, it's about maximizing safety and, involving your family, because nobody has more, invested interest in you than they do. And they get to see the safety that comes with it. And if it's not perfect, they're the first ones to really let you know that it's not right. And, you really have to listen to them and say, no, you know what, put the competitive spirit down. Safety's number one. So, and it's really hard for, my wife being a trauma surgeon. I think her absolute biggest fear is always being on track, being a staff surgeon on track to,
she knows too much. Yeah.
An accident that would involve me. And so it really takes her toll. And we've had many conversations that, if it ever becomes too much for her, then I'll stop, because, it just doesn't make sense to make it more than what she wants to tolerate. But, on the other hand, she's asked me, look, when you're not loving this, you need to stop, because, it takes a lot for the family to be able to be okay with this. And there's a huge risk that's going with that. And if you're not absolutely loving what you do, then you're taking on so much risk with very little reward. Then it's very unbalanced, and it's unfair to us. And so it's really just trying to balance that, which, someday, when you come home, you bring home the trophy, you're sitting on the podium, and you're like, yeah, this is amazing. Those are the days that get you through, when you're sitting on the track with the hood up, your smashed out windshield, your whole roof is caved in. Thank God you had a helmet on, and you're on the air with the race crew saying, you need to text Krista because she's watching this live, and you need to tell her that I'm okay, because she's sitting in the call room, engaged in this, but very far away. And so it's like, it's never about, are you okay? Can you let her know that I'm okay, and you've got to get this. And I know you have other races, but you have to get this information back. So it's a huge process, but we love it. We love it together, and she, I think she tolerates it. But
she probably loves you for it, but it's
exactly. And it's fun that we do this together. But I think we also paddleboard together, and she loves that way more.
It's more her speed. I mean, I know you're a pretty celebrated race car driver. I understand you were in the Central America Grand Prix as well. So, it's definitely an amazing thing that you enjoy. But those words of wisdom are really relevant. Just thinking about into the day that you stop loving it, you know that your wife sounds like she's incredibly supportive and wants you to be, happy in your life, which is, fantastic.
Yeah, and going on track, the last thing I say as I pull off to race, and she's on the front of the car, and we're on the headset together. I always tell her I love her because that theoretically could be the last time I talk to her. And so, like, the last thing that she hears in my voice is always going to be how much I love her. And coming off a track, she's like, way to go. That was awesome. So for me coming back, she's super supportive in that way.
Very cool. Well, I can only imagine what it's like having you teach your children how to drive. But I wanted to ask Deb and Mindy a little bit about that. I know that, there must be a lot of changes happening now. Mindy being an empty nester, what was that like, kind of getting your child, off to their next adventure? And then maybe Deb, you can tell us a little bit about your 17-year-old who's probably in the thick of it, and so what is that like? My children are young, so I've got a few years before I'm ever going to be in that position, but I'd love to hear about it. So
It's funny though, it goes incredibly fast. You won't believe it till you get to our points, and then you're like, whoa, wait, where did all that go? My daughter is dyslexic, profoundly so. And so there's been a lot of issues off and on. She's very good about advocating for herself. But honestly, we were more stressed picking a high school for her because of the dyslexia than we were for college. My biggest stress was college. She pretty much knew where she wanted to go. Colorado School of Mine, she wants to be an engineer, and that was all there was to it. And so my biggest stress was, okay, she better get in because I cannot handle disappointment if she doesn't get in. So I had to make her apply to a couple other places, one as a backup, and she got into Colorado School of Mines. That's where she is. And it's only been a couple of months, but she loves it. She likes her classes. She's doing well. She feels prepared. And the gift of dyslexia is you get really good study habits and you know how to manage your time, which is the biggest challenge when you go to college, right? Is knowing how to manage your time without somebody looking over you. But the other thing that you get to college, all the dyslexia stuff, they got that figured out. I mean, the advantages she has now, it's almost equalized a playing field. Plus, going to a STEM school and engineering school, it's not like she has to take a foreign language anymore, which has been the bane of our existence for the last 6 years. So being an empty nester is great because my kid's happy. She's doing well. She's at a place that she chose that she feels good at. Now, it could all change in a heartbeat, right? Everything could change, but right now it's great and it's just amazing. I can't believe it all happened so fast. Those 19 years went really quick.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal, and I imagine it's even it's more challenging when you have a child that has every child has issues to overcome. My son was no different. He had some speech impediments from having so many ear infections. His ears ruptured 3 or 4 times, and his hearing was delayed. And you try to fit in the time to make that all work. So I can definitely understand. There's a lot of speech therapy cards for an hour every night, and fitting in whenever I could to kind of get his language skills to a point where people could understand him, because he's incredibly intelligent. But if you can't articulate, people perceive you in a certain way, and you want your child to have every advantage in this world. And so I understand the time and effort that goes into making sure that your child can navigate the world. So kudos to you. You've got your kid into college. They're preferred number one. So, I think hats off to you. Deb, tell us a little bit about your experiences. You've got a 17-year-old, I believe, and you've taught him to drive successfully. So that, I think, tell us more about, what lies ahead and what's scary or not scary at this point.
Well, I do want to comment that one thing that's been great over the years is, friendship with other plastic surgeons. And women doctors are a little different from male doctors because we like getting hotel rooms together and stuff because it's a chance to get to hang with your friends. And so we've done a lot of trips together. We did the London and Paris over the New Year's before. We did Scandinavia on a Disney cruise. We've done Alaska on a cruise. We've done skiing multiple times to Colorado and other places. And one of the best times we had was we got this huge condo, and we had 3 mommies, 1 dad, 5 kids. And that's about the perfect ratio. Because with the 3 mommies, one of them's getting them dressed, one of them's getting them fed, and one. So that kind of worked out well. And then we could all take off and go. The women could go have cocktails, and we left the one dad with all the kids. And that kind of worked out nicely. Um, everyone's kid has challenges. Mine has a tendency towards anxiety and depression, and COVID was really hard on her because, again, we haven't had our nanny for a few years because she got ill. And so having someone at home, and she's old enough to stay by herself, but that COVID year at home was really difficult. So I had to set up pods for her to be at other people's houses a couple days a week at least, so that she wasn't completely alone. Because it's a lot to expect a college kid to do all their classes by themselves with no one watching them. It was too much to expect for a 15-year-old, 16-year-old. And so she's coming out of that and gradually coming into her own. And we've had counseling, and I think she's finally on the downward slope. But you know, I think COVID's been really challenging for the whole country, and especially so like because I never stayed home from work during COVID. Even when we shut down, there was always so much to do taking care of the current patients. And then after that, with the hospital shut down, we ended up operating in all these different places, and sometimes I'd operate at weird hours to get whatever times I could get when they would just cancel my cases.
Sure.
So again, that kind of stuff is tough, but you just you work around it. You come up with the best family that you can, your friends, their friends, and kind of go from there. And hopefully, um, she thinks she'll be happy whatever college she goes to, and I think she will be too. She thinks she wants to do engineering, but she has no idea what she wants to do. And so in that way, she's really different from me because I wanted to be a doctor since I was in high school. And but what I told her, change majors. I don't care. This is your chance to try different stuff.
Take some
And
chances, right?
yeah,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
she like a lot of kids her age, this generation, they don't want to learn to drive. I had to force her. So I
yeah,
said you must.
I think that, my kids were small during this whole pandemic and we're not completely out of it, but they adapted well to masks and, whatever. And their risk was a lot lower because they're, young enough that, luckily they don't have all the receptors. We still had fear, but, we kind of always still hope for the best. And I think it's incredibly difficult when you have a child who's a teenager dealing with all of this. And their social network is so important. And I had two, so they were kind of keeping each other company. Luckily, they're kind of Irish twins, so they kind of occupied one another. But I can only imagine what it's been like for a lot of families when you have children at that very, very social age where their friends are so important to them, and then they're kind of cut off, and that's probably been incredibly challenging. And I think a lot of plastic surgeons, um, have worked through the whole pandemic. Has that been the case for everybody? Has that been sort of the situation, or was there an opportunity to take some time? Was there any chance to maybe kind of do something a little different during the pandemic?
For us, we went full throttle. It was really hard, and with my wife, she was in the ICU, and we shut down. Our hospital was shut down, as was everyone in Colorado, for operating. But trauma still continued on, and COVID was full throttle, and so um, we both were at one of the designated hospitals who was a designated COVID hospital. So I was trying to do practice stuff. I had to let go of my entire staff. And then I was working, doing telemed with patients, but was in the ICU over at the hospital. And my wife was on the regular trauma and general surgery call and doing all of the pandemic stuff. So we basically left this, kid alone all the time. It was really, really difficult. And, our son has ADHD. And so that's always been our thing. And so at some point, we found out he was watching Netflix during school. So, when we brought him to the work and said, okay, you're going to sit here in the call room, at the hospital, or you're going to sit here at the front desk with seeing patients, you're going to put a mask on, you're going to look like a nice young man, and you're going to do your work. But yeah, we felt terrible because both of us were pulled out, and he was kind of left at home to man the ship.
Yeah, it's incredibly tough. Mindy, how was it for you? Was there full
I'm
throttle ahead?
Yeah, we were shut down for I think 5 weeks, that all through April into March, 1st of May, and then we were back at work. I am fortunate that my daughter, dyslexic that she is also an introvert. It's like she's been training for a pandemic her whole life, and like this, she just really thrived. She didn't have to be in the classroom. And then they went back to her private school, went back to school in the fall, and there were some restrictions and the trouble with quarantine. But she's a rule follower. Her nickname is T Compassion because things are very black and white for her. So, early on in the pandemic, unlike Lisa, who actually did work in the ICU, we all thought we were going to be working in the ICU. And certainly even here in Nashville, the Vanderbilt plastic surgeons are still doing ICU turns. I did. But when we thought that, Tessa looks at me and says, well, now listen, if you do, then I really think you need to enter the house from that back door and go directly to your room. I don't want you coming through the kitchen. I'll leave your food outside your door. Completely no problem, cutting me off. Just don't get her sick. Stay to your side of the house, use a different door to entry and exit. You can come in through the back patio from the garage. So we did fine with the pandemic. And like I said, luckily I like my family, even though we're 5 of us at the house, we liked each other. Our saving grace was I had upgraded my internet the fall before. Had I not done that in the fall of 2019, shit, with 3 of us working remotely and 2 kids going to school remotely.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you never think about the bandwidth until you're in a situation like that, right?
Who knew?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, so, all of you are incredibly, you're all amazing moms. You're all amazing plastic surgeons. You're all amazing women, first and foremost. I think our listeners have learned so much from all of you. I know I have. Any pearls of wisdom or thoughts that you want to impart for people kind of embarking on a career in plastic surgery, and that can look like a lot of different things, and kind of thinking about a family and what that has meant to you, having that family. I'll go to Mindy and then we'll come back to Deb.
I love being a plastic surgeon. If I weren't a plastic surgeon, I'd be a rock star. Unfortunately, I cannot sing. So probably plastic surgery is really a better move for me. And I can sing in the OR, nobody can leave. So there's that. Plastic surgery, a great specialty. I don't think there's any medical specialty outside of maybe family practice where you can change your practice as you age, as you move through your career and do different things and continue to reinvent yourself. Anytime you think, oh, I'm getting tired of this. When I first got out, I was doing replants, I was doing burns, I was doing all reconstruction, I was doing hand surgery and workers' comp as well as cosmetic. And I just gradually, as the years have gone on, have narrowed down, first getting rid of hand, then getting rid of wounds and getting rid of the skin cancers and then breast reconstruction. Recently, I stopped doing facial aesthetics. So it's a great specialty from that regard for anybody who is creative, who wants to run their own ship and wants to have some flexibility in their life. And yeah, it's a hard road. As to having a family, it's just when we were all in residency, there was a lot more taboo about being pregnant in residency, and that has changed. I mean, I think certainly for the better. We talked earlier when I got pregnant at 36, and I was pretty sure I wouldn't get pregnant because everybody knew had fertility issues. And then, guess what? No fertility issues. You are having them. So, I think it's a great specialty, and your training is different now from it was when all we were in training with the restricted work hours. So I think it's probably doable, but somebody told me, one of the old guard guys, when I sent out my birth announcement, said to me, whatever you do, pay more for childcare than you think you should, and don't ever regret it. So you got to have help, and just feel free to farm out the stuff, farm out the housekeeping, farm out, childcare, whether it's daycare or nannies or whatever. You can do it all. You just can't do it all at the same time. And you just got to learn to embrace that.
Those are powerful words, and I think words to kind of live by. Think through it all. Lisa, how about you? What about your thoughts on how things sort of evolved for you and what it kind of means to you.
I think the most important thing is to be present for your kids and your family if you decide that that's what you want to do. And I think you have to be thoughtful and strategic about how you do that, because there's really just only so many hours in the day to get it done. You've got such a busy schedule, and it's really hard. You have a sick kid and you have a full clinic, and you have to find someone to take care of your sick child to run your clinic. And that's a really hard place as a parent to be in, because you can't just call in sick, especially as a business owner. In private practice, you are the business, so there's no calling in sick. You can call in dead, but you better hurry up and get over that too. That's it. So
I work with some people who would come dig me up if I tried to call. I either, Lisa.
But I think I think Mindy's point is very well taken, in that I think spend more money than you think on childcare and extras. I had the staff. Two staff members in my practice had authority to come sign my kids in and out of daycare, because if I'm stuck, I couldn't go. And you just have to put in these resources, and you have to trust people. You have to find good people, because you don't want everyone having the ability to go pick up your kids and take them anywhere from school. So just being really thoughtful about that. And then work with your friends, because your friends are your family, many times more so than your actual family. And just cultivate your commune, cultivate your community. And 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 it's okay. It's okay to lean on them and take care of them as well, and be present.
Yeah, I think I try to think about that all the time. And there's a time where it was hard to be in both places, but I think you just find a way to kind of shift in and out of being present, and then also being present for your work and your job, and kind of try to do the best you can with that and make every day count. So
I
I
had
think that
I had an event where I had to take a patient back emergently at night, and it was like 9:30 at night. And I mean, it was emergency, and the patient was hemorrhaging, and we just had to go. And my phone rings, and I'm in the middle of this person's chest, and it was playing music through the sound system, so the overhead comes on, and the nurse, I didn't even realize that she picked up the call, and it was the babysitter who was watching my son, who had to have been maybe 2 or 3. And he was like, "Where are you? I'm going to bed." And so I'm trying to take care of this patient, and you have to have okay, I have to pause for 1 second. I have to be present. And he's like, "Mama, it's not fair. It's not fair. You need to be here." And I said, "I know, sweetheart, but I have someone who's really, really sick that I'm taking care of, and I love you very much. I want to be home to you really quick." And everybody in the OR started crying. And it's like, this is what it is. I'm like, you have to be real, and you have to realize that you can never be all the things that your kid wants you to be, even if you're not a surgeon. You're always gonna not be able to meet their expectations of whatever, but you just do the best you can.
Yeah, that brings tears to my eyes. I think we all have those feelings of, we're trying to do the best we can. Sometimes it feels, there are days, my husband and I, where we go, "Oh, today we get a star. We did a good job. We're good parents." It's usually a day of a birthday party or something that didn't end in a meltdown. But there are other days where you feel a little inadequate. And so I think you just do it all one day at a time, and try to do the best you can. The listeners that probably didn't see what we saw, but Deb, in between, I think she went and saw a patient. She was, she's in and out, and she's back with us again. So Deb, I wanted to turn it back to you to maybe give us some final words. I mean, you're obviously a superwoman. You're like managing this podcast at the same time as I think a full clinic, which is pretty cool. What has it been to you, like, where you're at now in your life, and also, what has it all meant to you? Would love to hear your perspective as well.
Well, like we discussed yesterday, I feel that for me, having a kid later was a much better choice, because you have the resources, and especially when, there's the good and bad about being in solo practice, but the good part being that you are the boss. And if I have to, I absolutely can just rearrange my schedule. It's difficult, but for an emergency, you certainly can. And if you plan far enough ahead, it's not that big of a deal. Definitely choices have to be made unless you have a really good support group. So I always liked doing face fractures, and that was one of my favorite things. But once I had my child, I basically switched off doing trauma call, and so I just do elective cosmetic because didn't want to have a kid and then not spend any time with her. And so now I do elective cosmetic, which I think is gratifying also. I don't know if I'll go back to face fractures and stuff because, being gone for 15 years, I'm not sure you can just pick it right up again, especially in a big city where there's tons of people who are really good at it already. But, it's certainly well worth it. I'm glad I did it. Thank goodness I had friends like Mindy, um, and Mary and those guys to help me through it. So I think that's all I'd say is you just have to work it out the way it's going to work for you. And you're going to make choices like depending on the amount of help that you have. Like I didn't have someone so that I could continue to do trauma. And, I had to really make a choice between my kid and doing more with the society. But, I think you can find fulfillment however you can figure it out.
Well, I just have to say, I think being a female plastic surgeon, the network and the camaraderie is refreshing and wonderful to see. It's certainly been amazing and a pleasure to kind of learn about each of you and get to know each of you. And, I think you're all, sort of ducks. You look so cool and composed, but I'm sure you're paddling under the surface, and you just have gotten good looking at it, doing that, and just sort of gliding along, making it look easy. But I think we've heard about how challenging it can be, and you sort of just have to adapt and navigate, each step of the way. I just want to say thank you for all of your time and also giving us a window into, the realities of, being in your own unique situations and kind of figuring it out. And hopefully it helps our listeners, who are kind of maybe at different points in their career, myself included, thinking about, next steps and where the road will take you. So I just want to say thank you again to all of our power women today, Lisa Hunsicker, Mindy Haws, Deborah White, and special thanks to the Limitless Leaders for putting this podcast together. I know it's been incredibly special and incredibly enlightening. Just hearing each of your stories and learning about each of you, each of your rock star women and rock star parents and rock star. It sounds like every rock star everything, but you just have got it together. So I just want to thank all of our guests for joining the podcast today, and I want to thank everyone for listening.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Limitless Leaders podcast series, brought to you by ASPS, the Aesthetic Society, and the American Hernia Society, with the generous support of Allergan Aesthetics. Check out additional episodes on your favorite podcast platform or download directly from ASPS EdNet. New seasons and episodes are coming soon. We look forward to seeing you there.